Hi everybody and welcome to USA Rugby Magazine. As always, I got Mark Keohane and I'm Kevin Ferguson. Mark, how you doing, bud?
Yeah, great, thanks.
Good. Let's get straight into it and chat about what's going on in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa regards to the championship.
New Zealand, we don't quite know. It's Thursday while we're doing the show, so they'll make a decision tomorrow whether what's going on with they had an outbreak.
Yeah.
A family of 4 tested positive. They shut down the whole country.
That
in New Zealand style.
That doesn't sound too knee-jerk.
Yeah. And we wonder why they react the way they do when the All Blacks lose one in Test match a year. So yeah, there was a 45,000 sellout to the Blues against the Crusaders. Would have been a great ending to, which has been an amazing Super Rugby tournament. Not that it would influence the result. The Crusaders are already champions. If that game does go ahead, it will probably go ahead with a crowd of 100 maximum. And the talk is that the match in Dunedin between the Hurricanes and the Highlanders will go ahead at this stage, but with no crowds as well. So that's kind of, for me, the relevance is how does that impact on the proposed rugby championship that was going to be hosted there between November and the first 2 weeks of December.
Well, it seems to me that Australia now have laid down their pair of twos and said, here we are.
Yeah, there's just this bitch fight, for want of a better description, going on between Australia and New Zealand. And really, Australia don't come from any position of strength. Not financially, not from a playing perspective, and certainly not from a draw card perspective.
So what have they said?
They've said, New Zealand has said they want to do a Trans-Tasman competition, but only so many Australian teams because they need the quality of Australian teams. They've taken exception to that and said our teams will beat your teams, which is a nonsense because they clearly haven't done it for the last decade. They've said, we'll play our tournament, you play yours, South Africa plays theirs, and Japan has their tournament. And then the top 2 teams go into a Super 8, and that becomes a new version of Super Rugby. That's on the table, and then a kind of rejig in how they see the Bledisloe Cup, etc.
And what was New Zealand's? What's been the feedback from that? Has there been an acceptance from it?
New Zealand have just said, put whatever you got on the table. We've put what we've put on the table, but we hold the cards in terms of.
Do New Zealand hold the cards, or do South Africa hold the cards?
South Africa definitely holds the cards in terms of broadcasting and viewership numbers. New Zealand always holds the cards from an All Black perspective or from just quality teams playing in a competition. The only thing that kind of hinders South Africa and New Zealand being the strongest alliance is the geographics. We're so far away. But that's why the SANZAAR, and we spoke about this previously, the SANZAAR a relationship, South Africa will always invest with New Zealand in terms of the Springboks and the All Blacks. Those games will always be there. There may be a shift, as we spoke about, if Super Rugby does get disbanded and we go north. It will be more for our regional and our provincial teams. But I don't think we'll ever lose that South Africa playing in New Zealand or the Rugby Championship. And SANZAAR could just become that, more the international competition as opposed to the regional or provincial competition. But Australia have been very bullish and I think showing typical Australian arrogance when they've really got no cards. Their competition is poor. They tried a domestic competition between Super Rugby and Test Rugby. It was like watching just an average club competition in any of the stronger traditional rugby playing nations. And if you go back to the early days, Super Rugby was the savior for Australia in that it gave that country a competition where it knocked our Currie Cup and it knocked New Zealand's MPC for something that was going to be slightly stronger to prepare the guys for Test Rugby. When Super Rugby kind of expanded too much and Australian teams were losing all the time, it really entrenched them as the 5th choice sport in Australia. Cricket will always be top, even though it's a summer sport when the team's playing overseas. Then you've got AFL, you've got soccer, and you've got rugby league. Rugby union, even when they were the world champions, was at best 3rd in the country. So I think New Zealand holds the sway between those two, and I think South Africa is the strongest position because the one country that can go north geographically is South Africa. It's an overnight flight. So I think the stories I hear from behind the scenes are that South Africa are well positioned to keep one foot in the SANZAAR alliance and obviously explore things in the Northern Hemisphere.
When you say SANZAAR alliance, do you mean, are you referring to the championship or are you referring to Super Rugby?
Well, SANZAAR is kind of the governing body of.
Yeah, but don't you think it's going to be very difficult for them to keep one foot in the Southern Hemisphere and commit to a Northern Hemisphere sort of competition.
When I say they keep one foot in, is that they say that, like you have the Six Nations, they're not going to try and play in an expanded Six Nations. They will still want to play in the Rugby Championship, and that's like the best of Southern Hemisphere.
So South Africa's the salt pills of rugby.
Yeah, well, even though there's one or two in the team. But it's, I think we're in the strongest position from a negotiation point of view. Obviously, the broadcasting is always stronger in terms of viewership, and then it just also helps when you are the current World Cup holders and ranked 1 in the world.
It sure does.
And you know, some people
Kind of been lost this year, eh?
It has been lost, eh? And the last time we really felt like this was when we were in isolation. We felt no one could beat us. So yeah, I think we're in the strongest position. I know that there was, when New Zealand's sports minister laid his cards on the table, and the New Zealand president and CEO laid his cards on the table, I know that pissed off South African rugby's leadership quite a bit, because they knew what was going on, but it wasn't supposed to be made public that they were now going to go their own way potentially next year in an interim measure. It kind of...
You know, I think, sorry Mark, I think it's very dangerous to be talking interim when we could be living in a different world post-lockdown.
Totally agree with you. And Yuri Rue, when he did his press conference a couple of weeks ago and spoke about Super Rugby, Black Lives Matter, the Rugby Championship, he said the only guarantee that you've got, he said it's going to be different.
Yeah.
He said, so everyone talking about exactly what you said, interim things. He said they're exploring every option at the moment. But primarily, South African rugby will be making decisions that are good for South African rugby, not necessarily good for SANZAR or for world rugby. And I like that kind of talk. It wasn't arrogance, but it was strength. It was... Yeah. We come from a position of strength.
He's done a pretty good job, actually, hasn't he?
No, he hasn't. I mean, operationally, he's done an outstanding job. Mark Alexander, give him his dues when he replaced Regan Hoskins as an interim president. He always says that lowest night was in Italy in 2016 when they lost to the Italians, and it couldn't get lower than that. And they did so much behind the scenes. Roadshows all around the country for 2 years, trying to get corporate confidence back, but also understanding they had to win on the field before they could get that. When they brought Rassie back originally as a director, Alistair was given the option to work under Rassie. He didn't want to do that. And then Rassie took over and always said it would be an 18-month job. And win or lose the World Cup, he was going to step down as the head coach, but he would want to appoint the head coach, which was then his natural successor there, Jacques Nienhaber. So we are, we've said it time and again, we're in the strongest position we've been in a long time. The calm has to be there. Absence makes people forget. All we've seen in the last 2-3 months is New Zealand rugby. So everyone's put them back on a pedestal. It's been great viewing, but I don't put them back on a pedestal. If we were watching some of the bigger games in Europe, if we were watching the top 4 teams in South Africa, no one else, there was no other rugby, they may be saying, geez, Bulls against the Sharks, magnificent game. So next year will really be the test, as we keep on saying. Whatever happens this year, people are finishing seasons, starting seasons kind of in an unknown territory. 2021, we got the Lions coming. We'll have a strong rugby championship again. That will be the post-World Cup year, and everyone always says the year after the World Cup is normally a disaster, even when they're playing, because people are in this recess and then they start building again the year after that. So maybe COVID's also helped that. It's just put everyone into the stands. So yeah, I don't see much coming of the Australian thing if it doesn't suit South Africa specifically, and I see New Zealand aligning more and more with South Africa when they also kind of get off this pedestal of a domestic championship that look good in 1 year, but is not sustainable, and they kind of understand without the broadcasting eyeballs that South Africa provides, that broadcasting deal looks a lot less lucrative to international broadcasters.
Okay, thanks for that, Mark.